Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying your Bible Live stories. Today we're going to talk about Moses and the plagues of Egypt. So we know that God asked Moses to go to Egypt and get his people out of Egypt. And he was going to send Moses and Aaron. And he told him, he said, Pharaoh's not going to listen to you. Pharaoh's going to harden his heart, and I'm going to even harden his heart. And but I'm going to allow that to happen because I want to show my might, and I want to make a way for the Israelites to leave. And God wanted the Israelites to know that it was him rescuing them. It wasn't Moses, and it wasn't Aaron, and it wasn't Pharaoh being nice one day. It was going to be God that was going to save them and get them out of Egypt. So a little bit about the plagues. The plagues were an attack on the Egyptian gods. So each one that came along, there was a god that represented what plague came through. And the first three plagues, they were on the Egyptians and the Israelites, and they were kind of a nuisance and kind of aggravating. But then the last six plagues, those were just towards the Egyptians. The Israelites were kept safe from those. And these last six plagues were more painful and destructive. So let's go ahead and get started on our plagues. So the first plague was when Moses went to Pharaoh and asked him to let his people go, and Pharaoh said no. And so God told Moses, put your staff in the water, and the water will turn to blood. So what that means is instead of having nice, fresh, cool water to drink, there is now blood in the river. And you can't drink blood. It's the same blood that's coming out of your body when you fall down and scratch your leg. And the fish that are in the water are now going to die because of the blood. So the water was no longer good. But there were Egyptian magicians, and they were able to reproduce this same thing. So Pharaoh said, I'm not letting your people go. So Moses said, all right. So then he said, all right, well, now frogs are going to come. Now, it would be one thing if one little itty-bitty frog came in there. But God sent so many frogs that it covered the whole ground. It went into the houses. It went into the beds. It was in the cupboards and the cabinets and in the bowls. So the people, they couldn't eat. They couldn't drink because everywhere they looked, there was frogs everywhere. So that's just gross. And but Pharaoh's magicians, again, they were able to somehow produce this. So they thought, well, no, we're not going to let you go. So God said, all right, now I'm going to send gnats and flies. So all these nasty gnats and flies, there were so many, it was like a cloud was just covering the whole place. And Pharaoh and all the Egyptians were like, please get rid of all these things. They're so annoying and aggravating. And finally, Pharaoh said, all right, let your people go. Well, I will let your people go, but you got to ask God to take away the gnats and flies. So Moses asked God, but as soon as God took away all the flies and the gnats, Pharaoh hardened his heart, and he said, no, I'm not going to let the people go. So now, this is when God said, all right, these are just going to be for the Egyptians. And so for the fourth plague, God allowed swarming insects. And these are like wasps and hornets and bees, and they would just come in swarms and clouds, and they would cause really painful stings and bites. And the Egyptians were in pain, and they were like, please, Pharaoh, get these things out of here. And so Pharaoh said, all right, Moses, please ask God to take these away, and I will let your people go. So Moses talked to God, and God said, all right, I will take away the swarming insects if you let my people go. And so Pharaoh said yes, but then again, after all the insects were gone, he changed his heart, he hardened his heart, and he's like, nope, I changed my mind, I'm not going to let him go. So then the next thing that came along was God said, I am going to make all your livestock die. So what happened is all of their livestock fell over, and there was no longer any animals that they could sell for money. There was no longer the animals that they could cook for food. And so the Egyptians didn't have anything to eat, and they didn't have anything to trade with. And this was a bad thing. So Pharaoh said, please, Moses, tell God to take this plague away. So Moses talked to God, and God said, all right. So, but as soon as God took away that plague, Pharaoh hardened his heart again, and he said, no, I'm not letting him go. So then it was boils, and boils were like these huge brown sores on the skin, and it would cover the skin, and it would be oozing with pus and yucky blood stuff, and it was painful, and it was again only on the Egyptians and even on Pharaoh and all his servants. And of course he didn't like that, and so he said, please, Moses, ask God to take these away. And again he took them away, but then God hardened his heart, and he said, I'm not letting them go. I'm not going to let them go. So then it came the plague with the hail, and hail is huge pieces of ice that fall from the sky. And the bad thing about the hail was that it came in this storm, and there was lightning and hail, but the hail would fall on the ground, and it would destroy any of the crops that were above ground. So if they had corn or wheat or whatever, or barley, all that would be destroyed. Well, then there's also, because of the storm, there was lightning, and the lightning caught things on fire. So all the crops that were above ground were completely destroyed, so they couldn't sell or have any food for that. Now, there was a few crops that hadn't come out yet, but when Pharaoh refused to let the Israelites go after the hail, God sent locusts, and these were like 3-inch big locusts, and they came in and they just covered the ground, and you couldn't hardly see from all the locusts, and they finished eating up the crops that were left that hadn't been destroyed from the hail and the fire. So again, finally, Pharaoh was like, please get rid of these locusts. And so God sent all the locusts away, but Pharaoh hardened his heart again, and he said, I'm not letting your people go. So there was one more plague, and this was the darkness. And the bad thing about the darkness was that it was so dark, and it was like heavy, and they could feel it, and they weren't able to see anything. And so for 3 days, people could hear things, but they were sad, and they could feel it in their body. They didn't want to get out of bed, and they just probably cried. And finally, Pharaoh's like, please, just take away this darkness. And so Moses talked to God, and God said, okay. And then after the darkness, in the Bible it says, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he was not willing to let them go. Pharaoh said to Moses, get out of my sight. Make sure you do not appear before me again. The day you see my face, you will die. Just as you said, Moses replied, I will never appear before you again. But little did Pharaoh know, something even more painful was going to happen to him next.